I'm going to take a couple of minutes to introduce our wonderful speakers. Dr. Salman Abu Sitta was born in Palestine in 1937 when he was under the British mandate for Palestine. He's a world-leading expert on Nakba and was an eyewitness and survivor of that catastrophe for the Palestinian people. He dedicated his life to documenting and meticulously mapping the Palestinian villages and cities that were razed to the ground, first by the Zionist militias, and then, after 1948, by the State of Israel, until the present day. He's the founder and president of Palestine Land Society in London, dedicated to the documentation of Palestinian land and people. He's also the author of several books and reports, including Mapping My Return, A Palestinian Memory, which you've seen copies of it at the entrance of the cinema, and it will be, there is a new edition of it being published very soon, and you see the flyers for it. Al-Nakba 1948, registers of the evicted population in Palestine, and perhaps his most comprehensive and internationally known work, Atlas of Palestine, 1948.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for attending. And I especially thank our friends who came from outside London, from Scotland, from United States, from English countryside. Thank you all for being here. You are here to see the labors of Eyal Yasman and Wiseman and team, who actually taking that task very valiantly in order to spread the truth based on facts. Knowing Eyal's background, I think this is admirable in a special way because in his pursuit of justice and pursuit of truth, he has crossed many barriers of tribalism. But this place, Al Ma'in, which is my birthplace in Palestine, it is a small story, but it is a light into the darkness. So I say big thanks to Eyal and to you, Samina, and to the whole team who worked almost a year based on maps and photographs and discussions together until we reached this conclusion. Yes, let me say that. So this is the story of my birthplace, Al Ma'in. On this day, 14th of May, 1948, this day, 14th of May, 77 years ago, that is 28,125 days ago, I became a refugee, expelled from my birthplace, Al Ma'in. On the night before, as you have seen briefly here in sketch, we were attacked by 24 armored vehicles. We knew later they called the Haganah. We don't know where they came from. We never heard about them. We never saw any Jew before. And they actually came and they blew up the school which my father built. And they blew up every single building. And they burnt homes. And as you said as you saw in the film, we were hiding as children and women in the ravine, seeing spurts of cloud and smoke billowing out in the sky, wondering whose home this is and whose building this is. So we saw that. This is, of course, imprinted in my mind all the time. I saw this from a distance, and as you know, there is nothing more dangerous than the memory of a child. It stays with him all his life. But on the same day, that's 14th May 1948, a Polish man in Tel Aviv, 100 kilometers away, told his friends from Eastern Europe that now they have joyful news. They have a new state. They call it Israel. And they said, with a hint of irony, that we shall promise the Arabs, not the Palestinians, who are on this land, they will live in peace and security with us. But of course, that man was named David Grun, later changed to David Ben Gurion, and he is the man who made me a refugee. I never saw a Jew in my life before, and my elders said they came from in smuggler ships to our shores from Eastern Europe. They were not wanted in their countries. Neither they want to stay in these countries, but they decided to come and take our home. They told me, the elders, they spoke a babel of languages, and they not always came from the same source. But with a child's mind, I wondered, who were these people? Why did they come to kill us and take our homes? What have we done to them? They have never seen us before. Why did they do that? But this became my life's mission, more pressing with my determination also to return home. In my exile, as I look back, the rest of my family's history in Palestine for at least 200 years, it came to my mind, this history. 10 years earlier, before 1948, the Great Arab Revolt ended. It lasted from 1936 to 1939. It was ignited by the British government treachery, I call it, allowing unlimited Jewish immigration to Palestine against the wish of the people. But my brother Abdullah, in our area in Beersheba district, he, with his comrades, led the revolt against the British, and they kicked the British out of our district for a year, from November 1938 to November 39. But still, if I go back 30 years earlier, before 1948, the infamous Balfour Declaration was declared on 2nd of November 1917. It was the promise of those who do not own to those who have no title in the absence of the rightful owners of the land. There was, of course, agitation against this threat. In 1921, Churchill came to London to calm the people down. He talked about talked to Palestine notables in Jerusalem. One of them was my father. Churchill asked him not to revolt against the British, to rely on Britain's goodwill, which never came back, But the British goodwill was lacking. The British were planning much more earlier than that, and than Balfour, to occupy Palestine from their base in Egypt. They planned to occupy Palestine from Egypt, but my father's uncle, Suleiman, led 1,500 horsemen from Beersheba across the Sinai and attacked the British garrison at the Suez Canal in February 1915. Waving his sword valiantly, Suleiman, my father's uncle, won the first day. But on the second day, the British brought machine guns and they moved him down. And my father, who accompanied him, carried his body on his horse back to Palestine. Still, let me go further back. In 1900, my grandfather, Dahshan II, rebelled against the repressive Turkish rule who were pressing us in our freedom, limiting our freedom. But earlier even, in 1865, my great-grandfather, Sakhr, took revenge against marauders from Egypt who killed his brother while in a trading trip in Egypt. So the Khedive Ismail of Egypt, the ruler of Egypt, settled with him by granting him 5,000 acres of land in Egypt. And that became the base for the Egyptian branch of my family. But I retrieved from Ottoman archives in Istanbul a circular by the Sultan to the sheikhs of clans in Palestine and Eastern Egypt, calling them to assemble in the house of my great-great-grandfather, Dahshan I, in order to sign an agreement of non-aggression between them. That was in 1845. 1845. 3 years later, after 1845, in another world far away from Al Ma'in, in eastern Lothian in Scotland, a man destined to destroy the legacy of my family was born in that place. His name is Arthur James Balfour. Balfour, who was born then at that time, nobody knew at the time, of course, that the role he would play in the creation of a Nakba in 1948. As I said, he was born in 1848. Exactly 100 years later, in 1948, a Nakba happened in Palestine, originated by this man. So we remember Balfour deed every day. Another colonial officer came to our land. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte. In February 1799, he crossed the Sinai on his way to Palestine, but he was separated from his army, accompanied only by his bodyguard, and he was spotted by my clan horsemen, At-Tarabin horsemen, from a distance. They prepared to attack the intruder, but then they refrained in the last minute from attacking him when they saw a huge tricolor army behind. So if At-Tarabin, my clan, captured Napoleon at the time, I would imagine European history would not be the same again. There will be no Austerlitz, there will be no Moscow, there will be no Waterloo. But I could go on. But I think 200 years of my family's story is enough to contend with the claim of those who came from Eastern Europe to dispute our presence in our land. But they claimed in Europe that Palestine was a land without people. They claimed that Palestine is a land without people. The corollary for that was, therefore, it is for people without a land. This is very convenient, but it is the recipe for genocide. They all knew that Palestine was populated by hundreds of villages for centuries, since Ptolemys visited our country in the 5th century BC, it was populated. So why then created this odious myth? It was not really a myth for them. They knew it is not true, but it was a plan. It was a plan to make Palestine a land without people. That was how I was made a refugee, and that is what you see today, what's happening in Gaza, to make Palestine a land without people. Now let me go back to Al Ma'in. On the second day of the Haganah attack, my father told my brothers who were returning to the university in Cairo to take me with them in Cairo, because my school was destroyed. And so he told them, take your brother with you. And my school was destroyed, and my father noticed that when I was standing around not able to do anything. So he asked them to take me with them. And then they took me, my brothers took me with them to Cairo. And then I think I was probably the first refugee child to enter Egypt in 1948.
Wow.
But in Cairo, I continued my education for 10 years until I got a degree in civil engineering in 1959. Then I came to London here, and I got PhD from UCL in engineering in 1964. London was a new chapter in my search for my home. Here I was in London, thinking that the source of all archives and information and records about Palestine are here. So I thought, but it was a shock for me to find in Britain that neither I nor my country, Palestine, existed. How come? I went to renew my alias card as usual, regularly. The clerk inserted the word uncertain against my nationality. So I shouted back at him, look, I am Palestinian, and my father is Palestinian, and my grandfather is Palestinian. Probably 10 years earlier, you have been an employee in the Palestine government in Palestine. But unfortunately, I got only a sympathetic nod. So I went to the Royal Geographical Society in search for my country, looking for Palestine maps. At the desk, they told me, there is no Palestine. We have no maps for Palestine. I said, are you sure? Royal Geographical Society, you don't have that? Here is a map on the wall. I pointed my finger. This is Palestine. And he said, oh, yes, yeah, you mean Israel. And so I said, you call it Israel, but for me it's Palestine. So I started many years of search for maps in the Royal Geographical Society, and then, of course, in other places, like the Royal Air Force, like the Foreign Office, like the National Archives in Kew Gardens, like many other places in Oxford and Cambridge and other places. Then from there on, I went to the United Nations Archives in New York, and I got many documents, especially about the war, about armistice agreement and so on. Then I went to Munich, where I found the first ever aerial photographs of Palestine in the First World War in 1917. And then I went to Paris to see the library of Napoleon Bonaparte and to see his traces of coming to my country. But my burning desire, as the film has shown, was to see or know the face of those who destroyed my life. Who are they? I was curious to know their names and places and faces and so on. I found their names and photos. One was the Russian Nahum Sarig. He was the commander of the Negev brigade which attacked us. Surprisingly, Ben Gurion called him incompetent officer. I found also the Ukrainian name Beni Matif. He was the Arabic-speaking spy who guided the Haganah to our homes. Naturally, he became member of the Mossad later. Then I found the name of the German, Jerry Boberman. He was the political commissar and the chief of intelligence. He reached our home and searched it and found, to his Orientalist mind, that we have a book called Shakespeare's Othello in our home. And he found also my brother's law degree. He was surprised to find that we read books. Then we found the South African Zipper. He's the most notorious of them. 2 days before he attacked us, he participated in the massacre of Bureir, which is a village 2 kilometers away from us, and where the school teacher, our school teacher, came from Bureir. He described the massacre of Bureir in his words, and I quote, "We broke their walls and we incinerated their homes, and we demolished and broke and destroyed and smashed and killed. That cold way, we no thought at all about that. The brain oozes after we shot them, and we saw the brain oozing and so on, and a bleeding horror that had once been a human being, and we had no feelings." End of quote. But what interested me more was to know how they destroyed our infrastructure, and I thank Eyal and team. They showed us how this is. So I'll skip that. But let me say, my engineering background told me that we have to plan for the return. And we did plans for the return, and we found startling results. We found that 80% of the Jews in Israel live only in 4% of the area, and the rest is controlled by the kibbutz, which is used to guard our land to prevent our return, and by the army. So practically, Israel is empty except in 3 large cantons, in Tel Aviv and West Jerusalem and in Haifa. The rest is empty. And I give you an example of that. For example, in my own case, Al-Ma'in, 60,000 dunams, there are 4 kibbutzim, only 1,100 settlers live there in this huge area at a density of 7 persons per square kilometer. My family, who are about 12,000, live 2 kilometers away in this land, not allowed to return. But let me put it in another way, in real numbers. Imagine one Ashkenazi settler traveled 2,500 kilometers to see the land of my family, of the land of 10 members of my family, who are denied to return home from 2 kilometers away. He came 2,500 kilometers to take my land, and my people are unable to cross the fence 2 kilometers away to go home. But that is the situation which we have today, and that situation of injustice, as you can see how monstrous this situation is, cannot last. And then all our efforts always is to restore justice, and justice means the right to return home, and I end by saying Palestine is free from the river to the sea.